Unfortunately, at the end of my last video, my computer crashed, so most of the work I did, I lost. So I'm not going to rebuild this one to show you how to create the mirror part and how to export it. But then at the same time, I felt like this is another interesting part to show you kind of like how I would tackle this situation, and I can cover the same details. So for example, let's say instead of having a complete object, I would like to only print kind of like the handle part and how I'm going to design and cut everything. So for example, I have here two planes I brought in. I will use those later for trimming, and I have some other parts here. Now, the difficult part, what you need to be aware of is how do you, how could I say that, try to make the most logical decisions. Now, this is not for injection mold casting, this is actually for 3D printing. And I would like to have a model where, for example, you even have those buttons. Not movable, but they should be inside the surface. So I know this object needs to have a material thickness of at least 2 millimeters. And then I would like to add those buttons in the outside, not in the inside. And for example, this surface here I would like to cut out and have my other button be there. So you have to plan ahead, like how could I construct the different parts? So for example, I know I could start with this one. So I use trim, cut this part away, and for example, use this one, so this body, trim, cut this outer part away, and this one I can hide for a second, because now I have this part here. Now, let's hide and hide. No, this one I need. There. Okay, so this part, this is kind of like my trigger that has to cut the stuff here in the center away. Okay, good. And then this part has to trim off the material that hangs over there. Okay. And the reason for that is simply, as you can see, like I have nice steps. Okay. So, what can we do? Let's maybe at this point think about the surface offset. So maybe this all I join together, stitch it. Okay, good. Now I can go to offset, and for example, select my object and say minus 2 millimeters, tab, and then it's generating the surfaces going inwards, I hope. Let's see. Let's rotate the view, and yeah, this seems to be working. Great. Let's hit OK. And there we are. So now we have the inside and the outside shell. So the inside shell currently I don't really need. I need the outside shell, because what I will do with the outside shell is I will use the outside shell to cut, for example, those buttons. Okay. And then those buttons I will use to cut my shell. So I create the opening. So there I cut it open. because this will be printed as a solid part, so I need to have kind of like the volume in it. Okay, great. So, and those surfaces I have here, I can now use to, for example, trim this parts off, those parts. And the same I do here. Trim you and you. Okay. And with my two bodies, so this is the outside, I trim the outside and the outside on both objects. And now my inside mesh for my handle I use to trim those two planes. And you see all I do is just select those faces inside. So I end up with those two kind of like loft objects. Okay. All this, for example, now I can join. So stitch. I see no red lines. This means everything is actually looks decent and joins perfectly. And maybe now at this point I can think about maybe I should round this edge a little bit, just really tiny, so maybe a millimeter. Okay, let's leave it there. That's fine. And the inside is sharp. And again, that's inside the object, you don't touch it. So as an industrial designer, don't be too concerned about this, specifically when you start learning this whole process anyway. Because that's specifically where the engineering department for manufacturing, etc., will take over and help you, or do it actually. So now let's say I would like to have only one half of this object. So again, I could, for example, create a cube, snap, snap, move it up, cut, okay. Oh, where did it go to? Where is it? What happened? Oh, I thought it was lined up, but it was not lined up. Interesting. Okay, there. Yeah, okay, true. Can't really cut when it doesn't penetrate the model. Okay, so you see, I use the cut command. Okay. And with that cut command, I also have like filled sides. So at this point, that's also where my previous version crashed. Now, this is a very simple design. Previously with my power drill model, it was already a little bit more computation intensive, and it's not necessarily a good idea to interactively mirror this over, because the software probably has to reflect all the design changes on the other side. So what might be a better idea is, let's see what happens if we copy and paste this model. Okay, so you see with copy and paste, also the features are copied, which is good. Because what I would like to do now is, let's see, I'm actually going to apply all those features. So I unstitch this solid and stitch it So you see now I have just one body. The other features are removed. So I could either inside the 3D printing software maybe flip it so I only send over one part, but I can also do, for example, the mirroring here. So I go to mirror, select my object, select my plane, and everything is lined up to the world. So this should work. Software is working and calculating, and there it is. Okay, perfect. So see, it created some extra geometry and structure for me. So I could, for example, send this one out here's my mirrored group. So those are all different ways how, for example, you can do this. And so same mini trick. Also, if you want to have a little bit more control over it, one stitch it, stitch it. This might take a second, and I think actually this way we ended up with a complete solid object, which of course is not really what I wanted. So what did I, for example, try to apply? It's the, I mean, the mirror modifier is interactive, but maybe what I want is interactive is nice, but I would like actually all those parts I have here to hide, and okay. So those, for example, I join. Oh, sorry, I can't actually, I have to cap this first. No, wait, I think, yeah, no, I can stitch it, yeah, stitch it together. So hold on, give me a second, it will make sense. Cap, add cap. Now I can stitch this second time. So now I have a tied object there. And then those, for example, that's my other side. I, for example, can make it visible again, stitch it, rotate the view. Once it's stitched, those are all connected. Then I can patch any open planar holes and then stitch it a second time. And now I have two different objects. And the whole point of this exercise was, because the interactive part is broken, I now simply have two halves which I can move around. Rotate around, take a look at, send maybe each shell separately to the computer where the 3D printer is connected to, or however you can just use it. So I hope this provided you a good overview of like sculpt, model, and patch and the different commands. So now to export this, I think we go to let's see, where is this actually? Oh yeah, it's here, sorry. You go to export, so I have those two parts selected, and then no, that was not the correct one. Hold on, 1 second. Ah, save as STL, sorry. Yeah, the export is if it has to be sent to, currently the way how it's implemented, to a different NURBS program, so they can continue working with it. If you want to send this to a 3D printer, you just select it, right click, and then save as STL, stereo lithography. And the refinement, you have high, medium, or low. Let's try to see medium. There are a lot of settings, and to be honest, there is no kind of like number I can tell you immediately what you have to use. We can maybe turn on the preview so we can take a look at, for example, how the mesh will look like. You might have to play around with those settings a little bit. So, for example, if I set it to low, still seems actually to be okay. So let's export it, desktop. Let's call this one low. And maybe this object I export, but maybe as high. We can maybe open it in Blender and then take a look at it. Okay. File, import, STL. Let's see where they are. Okay, so you can clearly see the upper one is actually the lower one is the high. It looks really nice and soft, but if you get closer, you see it's still very faceted. So I don't know if you maybe remember when we did the print of the cloth iron, there were a lot of facets on it. So those facets might be small enough so they don't carry over, but they could be visible. And it's also a question of precision and details. But we also don't have like an extremely precise printer. So maybe the low setting is actually sufficient because we're dealing here with a 2mm material thickness. So it's not really very, very thick. But yeah, so this is the process. And then you can bring this to the 3D printer and just put it into the print queue and print it out. That's all.